Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. All right, tonight we'll continue with the book of Daniel, and we're going to start at verse 17, and we'll try to get on through to the 35th verse. Now, you'll remember that last week we traced the verses 1 through 16 for events, to events that for Daniel, these events were future events. The things that he was getting, the words that he was getting were things that were going to take place in the future for him. But we can look back now on this from our perspective and see that okay, what was history for Daniel, or what was prophecy for Daniel, is history for us now, and that we can look at some of these things and see that again, like in 1 through 16, 17 through 35 is going to be very, very precise that in the prophecy that that took place. Now, verses 34 and 35, excuse me, are the transition verses that will speak of the ancient enemy of Israel as a literal figure. That's Epiphanes and Antiochus Epiphanes. We'll speak of him as a literal figure, as well as we'll look at him as a future figure too. Excuse me just a minute. We this last week everybody at our house kind of came down with some kind of a crud that's sticking right about here. So anyway, Daniel 11, 17 through 19. His intention will be to come with the strength of his entire kingdom, but he will reach an agreement with him. He will give him a daughter in marriage in order to destroy the kingdom. But his plans will not succeed or help him. Then he will turn his attention to the coastlands and capture many. But a commander will put an end to his insolence and pay him back for his insolence. And he will turn his face toward the strongholds of his own land, but he will stumble and fall, not to be found again. Now, these three verses that we got here they're telling of Antiochus III. Now, he's also called Antiochus the Great, and he was he lived from 241 BCE to 187, and he was the sixth ruler of the Seleucid Empire. Now, in an attempt to kind of make headway in Egypt, Antiochus III gave his daughter Cleopatra to Ptolemy V to be Ptolemy's wife. However, evidently, Cleo wasn't real happy with that, and she actually turned against her father Antiochus and sided with her new husband. So it just kind of backfired on him that she double-crossed him. So anyway, Antiochus launched several campaigns against Rome, but he was defeated eventually at Thermopylae and Magnesia. Now, during the campaign, he went from there. Antiochus III, he was pretty much humiliated by the Romans. So he went from there and started going back into his own kind of his own territory, because with all of his campaigns over there in the western part of his empire and the eastern part of the Roman Empire, he things kind of got unhandy in his own empire, so he had to go back and kind of put out some fires. And so while he was doing that, he was ransacking a Roman temple in, when he got back into his own empire, and a Roman temple to Zeus. And evidently the people were not real happy about that. They rose up and a mob killed him. And so there, that shows, in that verse 19, he said that he returned to his own land, but he will stumble and fall and not to be found again. So therefore, he would, there again, the scriptures are right on the money. Now, verse, and that's a picture of Antiochus the Great. Okay, so it has a real stony face there. All right, Daniel, the 11th, the 20th chapter, 20th verse. In his place will arise one who will dispatch a tax collector to extract tribute for royal glory, but within a few days he will be destroyed, though not in anger or battle. Now this verse here, can you imagine? I mean, one verse in the Bible that sums up the entire legacy of Seleucus IV. This was the son of Antiochus III, and he was remembered for sending out a tax collector to Jerusalem. His intent was to confiscate the temple treasury. Now, he was unsuccessful, and if you read the book of Maccabees, they also talk about how that when he did try to come and go into the temple and take the temple treasury and so forth, there were a set of miraculous circumstances that forced the tax collector to back down, and he went back to Syria, and eventually what he did, he poisoned Seleucus IV and tried to take over the kingdom himself. And so that's all that was in verse 20. Now, in 21 and 24, then in his place will arise a despicable person on whom royal honor has not been conferred. He will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom through intrigue. Armies will be utterly swept away from before him and will be broken, as well as the leader of the covenant. After an alliance is made with him, he will act deceitfully. He will rise to power with a small force. Without warning, he will invade the richest province and accomplish what his fathers or predecessors were unable to do. He will lavish on them plunder, loot, and spoils. He will plot the overflow of strongholds, though only for a time. Now, keep in mind that here we're going to be talking about Antiochus IV. Now, Antiochus IV is also called Antiochus Epiphanes, and he's famous for almost conquering Egypt and for his brutal persecution of the Jews, which actually started and precipitated the Maccabean revolt. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes was a ruthless and often capricious leader, and he, his proper name was Antiochus IV, but he took upon himself the title of Epiphanes, which means the illustrious one or God manifest. However, because of his bizarre behavior and blasphemy and so forth, he earned another nickname among the Jews. Instead of Epiphanes, they called him Epimanes, which means the mad one. Now, in the verses that I read, it says that if you go back where it says that on whom royal honor has not been conferred. Okay, this guy Antiochus Epiphanes was not in line to become the ruler of the Seleucid Empire. However, through trickery and palace intrigue and so forth, he had the true heir to the empire sent off to Rome, and they kept him in Rome as a hostage. So that's why the Bible says that this guy was not, he didn't have royal legitimacy. So an altercation, it's kind of interesting here with the, here's a bust of Antiochus IV. Now, here's an interesting little aside. You've heard of the story, you've heard the little thing about drawing a line in the sand. Well, I don't know if you'd ever wondered where it came from. It did not originate with Colonel Travis at the Alamo. All right. It actually started when there was an altercation between Antiochus Epiphanes and a Roman ambassador by the name of Gaius Populus Laenas. And what happened is that Antiochus brought his army into Egypt in 168 BC. Populus stood in his way and gave him a message from the Roman Senate ordering him to stop his attack. Antiochus responded that he would think it over and discuss it with his council, at which point the Roman senator drew a circle in the sand around Antiochus and told him if he did not give the Roman Senate an answer before crossing over the line in the sand, Rome would declare war. So Antiochus kind of looked at his options there, how many people he had, how many people the Romans had, where he was in this situation, and he decided, okay, I'll go back home. So he kind of made peace with the Romans at that point, and he went on back home. And so then if we go on to, these are some of the other things where he had, Ptolemy the Sixth attacked Antiochus, but he was defeated. And you'll see up there in the verses before. And then it says, Antiochus deposes the covenant prince, the Jewish high priest Onias III. Okay, now that part is in the scripture where it said, let's see, where the scripture said that armies will be swept away from before him and will be broken, as well as the leader of the covenant. The leader of the covenant means it meant the high priest, the guy that was in charge of the people of Israel. Because remember, at this point, they really didn't have a true godly king that was in charge of them. It was the high priest. And so what he did was he deposed the covenant prince, the high priest, and put in his own man into that position. And his own man there actually started a class or a school for the Jewish people, teaching them the Greek ways. Now, if we go on, it says that he will lavish on them plunder, loot, and spoils. He will plot the overthrow of strongholds, though only for a while. Now, Antiochus' history tells us that he kind of spread the wealth rather than taking the spoils that he would get from war and keeping them for himself. He would kind of spread it around with everybody, and So that kind of helped him, you know, in some quarters it made him popular. Even within Israel, there were those who were in favor of Antiochus because they were either secular Jews or Jews that just you know, they were political Jews rather than religious Jews. All right. Now, if we go back to the 25 and 26, it says, he will summon his strength and courage against the king of the south. The king of the south, of course, is Ptolemy, with a great army. The king of the south, Ptolemy in Egypt, will wage war with a very large and mighty army, but he will not succeed because of plots devised against him. Those who eat his delicacies will destroy him, and his army will be swept away. Many will be slain in battle. Now, some commentators, the way that this was written in the Hebrew, some commentators say that these verses refer back to Ptolemy the sixth, where he's defeated by Antiochus, and then his own internal palace intrigues kind of do him in. But you could also say the same thing. You could possibly say the same thing about Antiochus, that you know, he had a lot of palace intrigues against him too. Okay, there's a question. Am I correct that Onias III was the last Jewish high priest that was a true lineage of the priesthood, and from then on the priesthood was appointed for political means and not Levites? I'm not sure that's true, because remember, with Antiochus, you know, the Maccabees came and they fought against Antiochus, and they were able to put back into place people, and I think for several iterations, several generations, then they were able, and that was in 165 BCE that they destroyed, or that they defeated the Greeks there and Antiochus. So I think what happened is, at that point they did put back proper Jewish high priests, and the priests that were put in place before, they would still be Jewish. They may or may not have been actually of the line of Aaron, and they would have been another part of the tribe of Levi, but certainly not in the direct line. So I think we did have a return after the Maccabees. We did have a return of king or high priests who were of the proper lineage, until such time then as Herod, the Hasmonean king, came into power, and at that point then he would change out high priests with regularity to suit his own purposes. But yeah, that was, and you know, I may be wrong on that thing, but I believe that's what it is. That Onias was not the last one; he just was interrupted. Okay. Now here's a picture deal of Ptolemy the sixth there, and who knows, might have been a real handsome dude there had he not got his nose out of joint. All right, Daniel, the 27th and the 28th verses. And I tell you what, before we go on, let's see if there are any questions. Let me take the mute off. Unmute everybody to see if there's any other questions so far on all of these. I know it's kind of, in a way, these going through all of these lists of these kings, and back and forth, and Antiochus and the Ptolemies were going back and forth fighting each other, and it just went on and on and on, and it just they all have a similar name. So then you figure, which guy is this, and what battle is this, what year is this, and it gets pretty confusing. So anyway, any questions thus far with this, other than the ones that we've already had? All right, we will continue on then. So let me, the 27th and the 28th, these two kings, with their hearts bent on evil, will sit at the same table and speak lies. These two kings, now this is Ptolemy the VII and Antiochus the IV. They says they will sit at the same table and speak lies, but to no avail, for the end will still come at the appointed time. The king of the north will return to his own land with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant. He will take action and then return to his own land. All right. Now, like I said, this was Ptolemy the seventh, who was the son of Ptolemy the sixth, and Antiochus the fourth, who was actually not even a true royal, as it were. And they said that entered into untruthful negotiations, and one of the things was to restore the kingdom back to Ptolemy the sixth. And so these, you can imagine these two guys, they sit down with the diplomatic speak, saying that, yeah, let's get together and let's talk about, your poor old dad there, Ptolemy the sixth. He kind of got a rough deal, and he wasn't such a bad guy. He's a pretty good guy there. Let's put him back into power here, and then we'll just be friends and go away. Well, of course, each one of them is trying to somehow score an advantage over the other. Ptolemy the seventh is certainly not interested in turning the reins back over to his father, who had not done all that great a job of going and conquering stuff. And Antiochus, of course, he was interested mostly in gaining and he would love to sack Egypt and just take everything that they have and bring it on back. Well, both of them were deceitful. They were trying to cheat the other. So it's two cheaters sitting there talking to each other. Well, obviously then the talks will fail, and Antiochus evidently was the stronger of the two, and he goes in there and he plunders Egypt again. So how many times is what they would just go in there and take a bunch of stuff and then head on back north. Well, the Bible says that Antiochus, he set his heart against the holy covenant, and he will take action and then return to his own land. So what we find is that on his way back to his homeland up in Syria, Antiochus attacked Israel, and he killed at least 80,000 people, and then he plundered the temple itself. If you go back and read Josephus a little bit, you'll find that Antiochus III actually kind of liked the Jews. He gave them special privileges, and he was not very hard on them at all. So when Antiochus IV came along, it was quite a culture shock for the Jews, who had, they'd lived a fairly decent life under under Antiochus the third, and even under the other guy Seleucus, the fourth or fifth, whatever it was, the one that his tax collector poisoned him. So anyway, they had a period of relative peace, and then Antiochus comes in, and he's just the polar opposite of Antiochus III, and it starts, just oppressing the Jews terribly. Now, it says that in Daniel 29, the 29th and 30th verse, at the appointed time, he will invade the south again, only this time the outcome will not be as before. Remember, he won before. Well, this time along, it says the ships of Kittim will come against him, and he will lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his rage against the Holy Covenant. When he returns, he will favor those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Now, it says at the appointed time. Well, the appointed time was basically the very first opportunity that he had. He went back and was going to attack Egypt again. I mean, this rivalry between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire, I mean, it's worse than the Hatfields and the McCoys. These guys just couldn't stand each other, and all they wanted to do is wipe each other out. And so they, at every opportunity, they tried to figure out ways that they could do that. So, and this was about 2 years later, I guess, that turned out to be the first opportunity. And he came down to Egypt, but this time he was not successful. What happened is the Roman fleet came out there, and he had his own fleet that was providing support and so forth. And so the Romans came in, and these were ships from Cyprus, actually, and they came in and defeated him pretty roundly. So he was forced to turn back. Well, here he is. He just got beat up by the Romans. He's heading back up to home, his tail tucked between his legs. And what happened? He decided, well, I'm just going to go take out my frustrations on the Jews. And that's what he did. He went back and again killed a bunch of Jewish people. And it says in there that when he returns, he will favor those who forsake the Holy Covenant. What we found is, unfortunately, that there were people in Israel that they were so Hellenized that they would have rather lived the Greek lifestyle, using with the Greek gods. Basically, they turned their back on the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they were living the Greek lifestyle, even to the point of, if you can imagine this, okay, they even had, some of the men would do a circumcision reversal. And I just can't imagine how. I understand that they were doing that sort of stuff back over 2,000 years ago, and it was successful to one point or another. I guess I don't exactly know how they did it, but that was one of the things that they did, because the men would compete, or their social club was the gymnasium. And of course, all of the activities in the gymnasium were it was strictly men only. It was a man's club, but all of the activities were they took place in the nude, and so it was very obvious who was Hellenized, who was a Greek, and who was a Jew. In fact, the Jews did not would not participate. A religious Jew, a Torah observant Jew would not participate with the Greeks. They wouldn't socialize with them, and obviously, they're not going to go to the gym and hang out with the Greeks. So that's where we get down to getting pretty close. This went faster than what I thought it would be. In Daniel 11:31-32 says, his forces will rise up and profane the fortified temple. They will stop the daily offering and set up the abomination of desolation. With smooth words he will seduce those who act wickedly against the covenant, but the people who know their God will stand strong and prevail. Now, the most famous conflict with Antiochus Epiphanes is the Maccabean revolt. And it was this time, where Antiochus came in and he stopped the daily offerings. He killed a bunch of priests, and he was a real smooth talker, evidently, and he seduced a lot of the Jews into following his activities. But the Bible says that the people who know their God will stand strong and prevail. Now, I think we talked about that there were two factions within Judaism: the Jews and the Hellenists. The Hellenists accepted the practice, the pagan practices and the Greek culture, and the traditionalists, or the Jews, they were faithful to the Mosaic law and the old ways. Now, supposedly, to avoid a civil war between these two factions, Antiochus made a decree. He outlawed all Jewish rites and worship, and he ordered the Jews to worship Zeus rather than Adonai. Now, he wasn't just trying to Hellenize the Jews. He was actually trying to totally eliminate all traces of Jewish culture. Now, some of these things, he had laws out there that, okay, if the people circumcised their boys on the 8th day, then and they found out about it, he would kill the baby boy and tie it around the mother and require the mother to have that boy tied to her until basically she went crazy. And there are various other things. Or sometimes he would just kill him, kill the boy and then kill the mother. Or he was terribly, terribly brutal. Just amazingly brutal. And we'll see that in these verses 31 and 32, there begins to make this transition from the historical that Daniel is talking about into the well, of course, it's all future for Daniel, but for us, this is where we start looking at what had already happened with Antiochus, and now we're seeing that, okay, we're going to see this again sometime, and that's going to be in the period of the Antichrist. So part of what Antiochus did was he raided the temple in Jerusalem. He stole the treasures. He set up an altar to Zeus and sacrificed swine on the altar. And when the Jews, they expressed their outrage over profaning the temple, Antiochus rounded up a bunch of the Jews and either killed them or sold them off into slavery. And he made circumcision punishable by death. And everywhere the Jews were required to sacrifice to pagan gods and eat pig. So This was a real bad guy here. Antiochus hated the law of Moses and encouraged all he could of the Jews to turn against it. Some of the Jews who were false to their religion made covenants with him. One man named Jason, he was the brother of Onias, the high priest, by the appointment of Antiochus. And this is what I was talking about. Jason, he replaced the high priest, and the brother of this high priest that was replaced set up a training school for the youth to teach them how to do Hellenistic things, basically how to worship as a heathen. So the upstart of all of this, of course, was that the Jews took up arms against the Greeks, or the Seleucid Empire, and began to fight. And it began in the town of Modin in Israel, and then between 167, 166, the Maccabees led the Jews to a series of victories over the military forces of the Syrian Greeks. Now you remember that the Jews had been under subjection for a long time. They really didn't have trained warriors. They didn't have a national guard that even had some kind of military training. So what they did was that a lot of these people may have been displaced from their farms or from their work or something. So they were kind of desperate. So they became guerrilla fighters, and I mean this was a guerrilla war that the Maccabees conducted against the Seleucid Empire, and so it was a couple of years, and finally, around 165, of course, the Jews were able to defeat Antiochus. What happened is they just wore him down, because Antiochus was having his own problems back in Syria and the eastern part of his kingdom that were a whole lot worse than what the Jews were. So he had to pull a garrison out of Israel. In fact, by his delaying pulling a garrison out of Israel, he severely limited himself in his battles in the eastern part of his own empire. And so the story then about the Maccabees. They beat the Greeks, and then they went back in and cleaned up the temple and rededicated it, and they only had enough oil to light the candles for one night, light the menorah. There weren't candles, but light the menorah for one night, and the menorah stayed lit for 8 nighs. And so therefore we have Hanukkah. That is the story of Hanukkah. And Yeshua celebrated Hanukkah, or the Feast of Dedication. That's what they call it, the Feast of Dedication. It also has turned out to be the Festival of Lights. And so that was the origination of that Jewish holiday. Now we see that all of this stuff with Antiochus, it prefigured the Antichrist. Well, why? Because he stopped the daily sacrifices and the committing of the abomination of desolation. Now, there are those who say, well, this was the abomination of desolation. But no, it really wasn't the final one, because remember, in 24th, 25th chapters of Matthew, Yeshua himself talked about the abomination of desolation that was to come. So it's still in the future, and it would be the one that's in our future now, would reflect back as to what happened with Antiochus, so that I believe that somewhere along the line in the middle of the Great Tribulation, that someone is going to come in and make some kind of a treaty with the Jews, and then halfway through that treaty, they will do something that will desecrate the temple. And of course, that does mean that in these last days we're going to have a temple. Growing up, people had told me, says, well, Yeshua could come anytime. Jesus could come anytime. I mean, you could, and that was one of the the things as a kid. If you got home from school and you looked there and your mother was not there. Of course, your dad's at work, but you go in there and uh-oh, mom's not there, and there's food on the table. There's something that say water boiling on the stove, or food in the oven or something like that, and you look around, you call for your mom and she's not there, and you call again, and then finally you start panicking because you decide, oh no, the rapture has come and I missed it, and that was something that we were all indoctrinated with as a child. And they had the Left Behind series and that sort of stuff. Well, now I look at that and I say, well, I believe we were taught wrong as children that this idea of a pre-tribulation rapture. But that was part of the thing. And now we know, okay, we're going to have a temple. I mean, the Jews are going to have to build a temple so that it can be desecrated. That's just part of it. And so we're going back. I wanted to just say that, okay, we have reached the end now of the historical part of chapter 11. The historical part for us, all of it was future for Daniel.